Good morning or evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Santa Monica Rent Control Board. So this is the 8th meeting of the Santa Monica Rent Control Board in an effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19. We are conducting virtually. We convened or recessed to close session at 6:15 p.m. and reconvened now at 7:14. Can we have a report of closed session, please?
Yes, there's no reportable action from tonight's closed session.
May we have approval of the minutes? There a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Drawn moved, Commissioner Foster seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Sultan?
Yes.
Commissioner Trosis?
Yes.
Commissioner Duran?
Yes.
And Chair Phyllis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to change my vote to abstain because I was not present at the last meeting. Okay. Moving on to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to speak. It's my understanding we do not have any public comment tonight. Is that correct, Mr. Gwynn?
That's correct. But don't forget the special agenda items.
Okay. We have a new jurisdictional item, request for an exemption for new construction, 1012 2nd Street, Unit 1.
Excuse me, Chair Phyllis. Before we move on to that, could we do the special agenda items?
Yes, I skipped over that. Thank you for reminding me. Can we address the special agenda items, please, which are announcements pertaining to the Rent Control Board?
Yes, I have an announcement this evening, and then Mr. Lewis has one as well. So I just wanted to mention that in September, the City Council enacted new leasing requirements that apply to all rental units in Santa Monica. These new regulations are intended to preserve Santa Monica's rental housing stock for permanent residents who want to live in the city on a permanent basis. The new rules go into effect tomorrow, and they include units must be rented only to natural persons and only to tenants intending the unit to be their primary residence. And units must be rented for an initial term of not less than 1 year, and units may not be rented furnished. So the ordinance is available on the city's website. The City Council will be considering some minor amendments to the ordinance at this coming Tuesday night meeting, but the ordinance as passed in September goes into effect tomorrow. So that's the announcement I had this evening, and then Mr. Lewis wanted to talk both about the city's eviction moratorium and the state eviction moratorium.
General Counsel, please.
Yes. There's been a lot of, not exactly confusion, but questions, I would say, about how does the city's moratorium work currently? How has it been affected, if at all, by the actions that the state has taken? And so I wanted to just very briefly touch on that because it's really less confusing than it might seem to be. And to illustrate that, I've actually created a document that I'd like to share on my screen so that it will make it easier for everybody to understand. It's a visual depiction of these rules. I'm just going to do that now. Please bear with me for a second. Okay, can everybody see this? No?
Can you enlarge it a little bit?
Yes. Oops.
Maybe instead of at like 57%, it could be at like 75.
How's that?
Perfect.
And actually, I'll make it bigger still. This row that you see along the top here are months. So it goes from March of this year through the end of August, really to September 1 of next year, 2021. The items in blue are city actions, and the items in green are state actions. The city actions are as follows. Initially, the city enacted a moratorium that would have evicted, that would have prevented evictions for non-payment of COVID caused non-payment of rent. And there was a whole set of procedures for that. A tenant under the current iteration of that, which has been extended a few times, has until the 31st of September of next year to pay accrued rents, and the landlord can endeavor to evict or couldn't endeavor to evict the tenant for non-payment until that date. But that has been made moot by changes to state law, which we'll get into it in a minute. Also, as of now, the city has a moratorium in effect, which is this third blue line here, which says that a landlord can't do any kind of eviction for any reason except for Ellis through the end of this year. And in the case of Ellis, there's another 60 days added onto that. The green boxes here are what has been done by the state. And as you'll see, it really overtakes to a great extent all of these things except for this thing, which provides for no eviction for any non-rent related cause. Under this change to state law, a tenant cannot be evicted even if the tenant didn't do the things that they were required to do up here with respect to the city's eviction moratorium, which were certain notices that they had to give. Even if they didn't do that, under state law now, a tenant can never be evicted for rent that was unpaid due to COVID income loss that occurred between the 1st of March of this year through the end of September of this year. The tenant still owes the money, but they can never be evicted for not having paid it. From the beginning of October through January 31st, a tenant can't be evicted for non-payment of rent as long as the tenant pays at least 25% of the rent that accrued during that period. And they have until the 31st of January to do that. So let's say the rent is due on October 1st and they didn't pay it, but they complied with the notice requirements that I'll get into in a minute. And then they paid the November rent, but then they didn't pay the December rent. They don't have to pay 25% each month as it comes up. As long as they pay the collective amount of 25% for each rent period it was due by the end of January 31st, they cannot be evicted for that non-payment. That non-payment, if it occurs, of that 25%, of anything rather above that 25%, the 75%, or the 100% of the rent that was unpaid from March through the end of September, can all be collected only through a small claims action or a judicial action, and that can be collected from March the 1st of next year all the way through the end of February of 2025. So there's a significantly long period when landlords could do this, I believe, because the legislature believed that there might be quite a bit of backlog in the courts because of unpaid rent. There are still some rules with respect to the rent that may not be able to be paid from this month through the end of January of next year. And that is that if the rent isn't paid, the landlord has to give notice to the tenant, a 15-day notice, not the 3-day notice that applies now. And they have to include with that a form that the tenant just has to fill in to say, I've had COVID-related impacts that have prevented me from paying my rent. And as long as they do that and return it to the landlord within 15 days, then they cannot be evicted ever for non-payment of the 75% of rent beyond the 25% that they're required to pay again by the end of January. A landlord also has to currently, by this month, have informed all tenants that this is now the law. This month, all the way until the end of this month, courts still may not issue unlawful detainer summonses. So there are no evictions that can begin right now, regardless of what has happened. You may recall that the Judicial Council enacted a rule some time ago that also prevented the issuance of UD summonses. And that has now expired, but the legislature has acted to maintain the status quo through the end of this month. I already covered this little box down here, which is the period during which in a civil action, again, not an eviction action, but a civil collection action for the collection of a debt, the landlord can collect the money that was not paid in full from March 1 of this year through the end of September, or 75% unpaid from this month through the end of January of 2021. As you can see, these changes basically make moot this provision up here that talks about until when the tenant had the ability to pay. It also makes moot the requirements for tenants to give certain notices under the city's moratorium. The only thing, again, that remains live, because it's not covered by anything in the state law, is the continuous ban on evictions for non-payment related causes. There is, as an overlay to all of this, a federal CDC moratorium on evictions, which I don't know if it's yet been subject to litigation, but it may be. But that is still out there. But in terms of things that we deal with within our specific jurisdiction, these are those things. So I wanted to just give this to everybody so that they can see this, see that it really seems complicated when you're just talking about it in the abstract, but when you see it and you can see these specific dates, all you have to do is, look at this chart, look at the date, look down below, and see what the rule is. All right, I'm going to now stop sharing my screen if everybody is okay with that.
Stephen, can I ask a question? Or sorry, yes. Are you presenting?
Pardon?
Are you still presenting?
No, I'm not presenting anymore.
Thank you very much for putting that together. Could we make this into some sort of like easily plain language public facing document, or do we feel like the city of Santa Monica has that under control? I like this. I want it. Is our entire information, coordination staff out there providing, are you training all of our info codes on how to answer the phone based on this information, or how are we using this document that you put together?
Well, I put this document together this morning, so we are not using this document. Sorry. I put it together for the purpose of. I'm sorry?
No, is that because you knew I was going to ask for a simple explanation?
I think that if Executive Director Condon agrees, we could give this document to the city attorney's office, who is the entity that is really dealing with the non-rent control issues, which is really all of this. And if they don't have any questions or concerns about it, we can then provide it to our constituents.
Great. I would love it if we had some plain language information for our constituents. Like I said to you and Executive Director Condon, I was concerned because I was getting a lot of questions about people being confused about what, and I think that we even have, some legal confusion about how the DDC eviction moratorium intersects with our local, intersects with the state. I mean, I think that this is all being figured out. So I think the more information, yes, the city has emailed people, yes, we've emailed people, but the more information that's accessible, the better, and making sure that everyone has it. And I would love if we're going to be distributing it, I would love to get a copy as well. So thank you for doing that, Stephen.
My pleasure.
Yes, we will share it with the city attorney's office. They have done an FAQ, which they have available on the website. It is pretty straightforward language, but we will share this with them and also make sure that the information coordinators have it to assist them in answering this question. There are a lot of resources available in this area, and they are referring people to those other resources as well. So we will certainly share it with the information coordinators and the city attorney's office. And thank you for putting that together, Mr. Lewis.
My pleasure.
I think we're now on to jurisdictional item 10A, which is an exemption for new construction on 1012 2nd Street, unit number 1. Can we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Commissioners. This property is 1012 2nd Street, and in 2005, the property owner was bought by the LLC that owns the property, that Ellis did, leaving one single family home on the property, but Ellis, the apartment building, one unit per floor. The rent board has already granted it in a new construction exemption for the other 3 units, but the bottom floor hadn't applied for it, and they have now. The rent control law generally exempt units built after 1979. The exception is on Ellis properties where their the new unit is rented within 5 years of the Ellis. That's not the case here. In fact, the certificate of occupancy for the structure was issued after 5 years had already passed. So that exception doesn't qualify. For that purpose, the staff recommends that the board grant the new construction exemption application here.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I mean, I just have a comment. I almost feel as a matter of principle, the fact that this was Ellis and then 5 years, almost 5 years to the day, it's brought back, definitely seems quite disingenuous to me and a clear way to skirt the legal requirements. So it's very hard for me to permanently exempt this, but I guess we don't really have a choice. I just want to be on record by saying, again, we need to make some common sense changes to the Ellis Act. And we're all, I think, working on that at a state level, but yeah, it's very, very hard for me to vote yes on this.
I am going to recognize Commissioner Drawn, I will recognize you first.
Thank you. Chair Phyllis. So, whatever the positions may be, I think that the black letter law is clear here, and they're in compliance with it. So, I mean, they met the threshold, and so they can do this. That's what the law states, and so I mean, obviously we have to follow it, and I know that we will. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I echo my fellow commissioners' concerns, and this is precisely why we need restrictions on post-Ellis uses, because we one-to-one replacements. This is, every time someone does this, they raise the profile even more about how the Ellis is being gamed. So enjoy your exemption, but this is how public policy is made.
Commissioners, if I could clarify. Sorry, yes, it's on. So just to be clear, what happened is that this building was okayed for occupancy a little after 5 years had passed. And then the condo units were sold off. This particular unit that's issued, owner is not renting it. The owner is just simply applying for the new construction exemption.
So you're saying, sorry, are you just trying to say that this owner is not the one responsible for the return to the market?
Well, we aren't necessarily certain that any of the units have been returned to the market, since when the previous owners of the other 3 units applied for the exemption, the board granted those exemptions pretty much all in one application. And what was left was this bottom one, which has now been sold by the developer. And the new owner has then stepped forward and applied for the new construction exemption. So it's a little bit different than the scenario that you're talking about, with which we're also familiar. Certainly people trying to game the system, but that's not necessarily what's really happening here.
Although someone gamed the system at some point. We heard the 3 others, correct? Because I remember looking at this property with the one house and okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, every time we look at a post-Ellis use where it's not being returned to rent control, and it's being used for housing. I mean, this is why we need one-to-one replacement, because we're losing affordable housing stock and it's being replaced with extremely rich housing stock. But that's not the issue before the board. The issue before the board is whether to grant the exemption. You can clearly grant the exemption and, lobby our officials as fit.
I move we grant the exemption, report the findings of fact and conclusions of law, and pass the exemption.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Yes. Commissioner Trostis,
Yes.
Commissioner Foster,
Yes.
Commissioner Drun,
Yes.
Commissioner Sultan,
Yes.
and Chair Phyllis.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now we have a public hearing on whether to amend Board Regulations 1600, 1602, 1620, 1622, 1626, 1629, and 1630, respecting the accommodations for the rental market. May we have a staff report, please? Oh, but you're on.
Yes, I was going to say it will be much easier for you to follow me if you can hear me.
I agree. Concur.
And neither the state nor the federal constitutions guarantee the right to take a residential building off the rental market. So a local government could constitutionally require that a residential apartment building remain in operation to provide needed rental housing. And if a local government did so and an apartment owner no longer wanted to be a landlord, the owner could simply sell the building, which would then continue to serve as rental housing under someone else's ownership. But since 1986, California has had a statute, the Ellis Act, which gives residential landlords a statutory right to terminate all of an apartment building's tenancies and take that building off the rental market. At least as stated by the legislature, the purpose of this statutory right was to let landlords, quote, go out of business, unquote. Owners could then sell if they wanted to, or they could keep their now vacant building and turn it to a non-residential use, or even allow it to simply sit empty. But when it enacted the Ellis Act, the legislature knew that owners could easily abuse the right to take a building off the market by using the act not to go out of business, but simply to get rid of all the tenants and then immediately re-rent to entirely new tenants, possibly at far higher market rates. Some people, especially here in Santa Monica, may say, well, that couldn't have been a worry at the time of Ellis's enactment in 1986 because Costa-Hawkins wasn't enacted until 1995, going into effect in 1996. But it's important to remember that San Francisco, which was one of the markets that was most in need of and affected by rent control, has always had vacancy decontrol. So this was something that was before the legislature at the time, and now, of course, it's a statewide problem. To prevent those abuses, the legislature included in the Ellis Act from its inception a handful of tenant protections. Chief among those protections were provisions stating that if an owner puts a property back in the rental market within 10 years of using the Ellis Act to withdraw it, the owner must give all the displaced tenants a written offer to return to the units from which they were displaced. If an owner put the building back on the rental market within 5 years of the withdrawal, the returning tenants could be charged no more than they could have been charged if they had never left. And if an owner failed to let displaced tenants return on those terms, they would be liable to the tenant for punitive damages. Moreover, if an owner returned the building within 2 years, the withdrawal was presumptively improper, and the local government, as well as displaced tenants, can sue the owner for punitive damages.
Good.
Notwithstanding the Ellis Act's stated purpose of allowing apartment buildings owners to, quote unquote, go out of business, owners in recent years have been using the Ellis Act as a means of maximizing a building's profit, incorporating a period of withdrawal from the rental market into the plan for the building's ongoing business operation. To make this work, some owners would cause as many tenants as possible to leave a building by means of buyouts, harassments, or misinformation. They would then use the Ellis Act to withdraw a building from the rental market only when a handful of tenants remained. They would then wait 2 years to return the property to the market in order to avoid a civil action initiated by the board or the city, and do one of two things. They would either purport to return to the rental market only those units that were vacant at the time of withdrawal, because there would be no returning tenant who could be charged only the pre-withdrawal rent, or they would pay the displaced tenants the punitive damages amount specified in the Ellis Act and claim that doing so extinguished the displaced tenant's right to return. Some landlords even did both. In addition to initiating legal action to combat these schemes, the board also encouraged the legislature to close the loopholes that permitted this type of abuse, And the legislature did so with amendments to the Ellis Act that went into effect on January 1 of this year. Those amendments made the following three very important changes. One, they specify that a landlord returning a withdrawn building to the rental market must return the entire property to the market, not just selected units, with narrow exceptions for units that are occupied by the owner. These amendments to the Ellis Act also specify that for calculating the 2, 5, and 10-year periods opposing tenant protections when a building is returned to the market, there's only one date of withdrawal for all the units, and that date is the latest date of withdrawal for any one unit. Finally, they specify that owners can't buy their way out of the tenant protections and procedures related to return of a unit to the market that provide for punitive damages. If an owner fails to comply with the procedures for the return of accommodations to the market under these new changes, the owner must pay the punitive damages and still comply with the procedures. It's our view that that was always the law, but the Ellis Act now makes that expressly clear. And I provided for the board's convenience as well as that of the public a copy of the legislature's amendments to the Ellis Act together with a redlined version of the board's Ellis regulations incorporating those amendments. The affected regulations are regulations 1600, 1602, 1620, 1622, and 1629. Because these regulatory amendments do nothing more than implement changes to state law, changes that the board itself advocated for, I recommend that the board amend its regulations accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve the new, I don't know, do I need to repeat all of the new regulations as?
I've actually prepared a motion language for you at the bottom of the staff report.
Okay.
I missed my paper version.
I know, I really
and being on the call at the same time.
Would it be appropriate, Counsel
I'm looking
Lewis?
at the computer screens right now. Hold on.
Appropriate, General Counsel Lewis, to move to adopt the motion as stated at the conclusion of the staff report?
Yes.
Okay. I move that the board amend board regulations 1600, 1602, 1620, 1622, 1626, 1629, and 1630 of Chapter 16 of board regulations respecting the withdrawal of accommodations from the rental market to bring those regulations into conformity with the recent changes to the Ellis Act made by AB 1399, yay, as set forth in Exhibit 1 of the staff report.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Duran?
Yes.
Commissioner Trosis?
Yes.
Commissioner Sultan?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
And Chair Phyllis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Brings us to administrative items. Administrative item A, whether to adopt resolution 20003, permit hearings by written declaration during COVID-19. Brief staff report, please. Oh, and General Counsel, you are muted. Oh, now you're not.
When the state and local governments in March issued their Safer at Home orders, those orders, as well as the highly communicable nature of the virus that necessitated those orders, made it impossible for the board's hearing examiners to hold in-person hearings. When the pandemic began, it was anticipated that this situation would last for a few weeks. As it became clear that the crisis would continue for an indefinite period, the board could not continue to indefinitely suspend people's access to hearings without abdicating its responsibility to carry out its core responsibilities of administering and enforcing the rent control law. This realization presented a problem. The board could not faithfully administer the rent control law without holding in-person hearings, but its own regulations arguably required in-person hearings. To remedy this problem, the board enacted Regulation 15020, which gave the administrator, subject to immediate ratification or rejection by resolution by the board, the ability to amend or suspend hearing procedures contemplated by regulation to the extent necessary to ensure safe access to the hearings process by all owners and tenants of controlled property. The board's first regulation on this subject was Resolution 20001, which provided for hearings by teleconference and video conference. So far, it's been possible to hold all hearings in those two ways. But there's now at least one constituent who lacks the equipment, the know-how, and the personal wherewithal to participate in hearings by electronic means. The administrator has therefore determined that it's appropriate to amend hearing procedures only when clearly necessary to provide for hearings by written declaration. This is a hearings procedure employed by the courts in the case of minor criminal infractions arising under the Vehicle Code, as well as by other administrative bodies. Under this procedure, opposing parties may submit their cases in chief in writing and may rebut each other's cases once in writing, limiting rebuttals to categories of evidence and arguments set forth in the other side's case in chief. Staff recommends that the board allow for this procedure by adopting resolution 2003, thank you, which has been provided to the board and to the public as a part of the board packet. Thank you.
I'll move to adopt this resolution. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion by.
That speed reading was amazing.
Well, the chair said quick, so I did my best.
That was fast.
That you've satisfied and exceeded all my expectations. So, okay, I've moved. Commissioner Foster seconded. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Sutton.
Yes.
Commissioner Foster.
Yes, having a hard time hearing you, Lonnie.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Trosis.
Yes.
That's better.
Commissioner Drawn.
Yes.
And Chair Phyllis.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we now have a final budget report for fiscal year 2019-2020.
It's an information item tonight. It does not require any board action. The written report is quite detailed, so I'm just going to basically summarize that as adopted by the board, fiscal year 1920 budget had a small surplus. It was essentially a balanced budget with a small projected surplus of about $42,000. Last year, the board collected approximately $164,000 more in revenue than was originally projected, and we were able to reduce our expenditures by approximately $124,000, resulting in net revenue of approximately $330,000. After making the third PERS loan payment to the city and subtracting the approximately $125,000 spent in the board's database replacement project last year, just over $157,000 will be added to the agency's reserves. As I said, the report is detailed. That's my summary. I want to thank Lima Noseworthy and Lonnie Gwynn for their work on the budget, for preparing it and monitoring it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Tracy, would you mind, or Executive Director Condon, I know that, we have a budget here that is skillfully balanced thanks to all of your work. I really appreciate Lima and Lonnie. I don't know what we would do without all of you. However, I'm very, very concerned about our impending eviction cliff in the wake of COVID, the number of vacant units that we are seeing in our community, all of these events that we are not quite clear about what's going to happen, especially with our future election. Do we have any sort of indication of stability moving forward here, or what's the next year looking like for this agency?
Well, I think there's certainly uncertainty. There's uncertainty about the economy, as you expressed. But this year, we have been able to collect the registration fee from property owners that they are required to pay. So we do not see a major impact on this year's budget. But we need to, just take it easy and watch what's happening coming towards us in the future. We prepare the budget, as you know, in the spring, and we will be at that time able to provide more information. But I am hoping that we will be able to have a budget that is similar to this year's budget, probably with a bit larger deficit, just because here we were able to collect some past due registration fee judgments of significant amounts. One was almost $80,000 and another of $10,000. So that really helped us out this year, and we do not anticipate that type of thing in the future.
Okay, I would just, say that whenever we can, I think we should be as fiscally responsible and conservative right now as possible. I would also just say, we all know this, we were anticipating some sort of relief from the federal government, so that we could get some, relief to our landlords, quite frankly, to make sure that, people are able to stay in their homes, and landlords are able to stay great, property owners and providing great housing for our tenants. And so I'm very concerned, I'll just say, to see what happens. We know that the legislature, the federal legislature, has decided not to really push anything until after the election. So we don't know what's going to happen, and I would just say that I would like to be hello, Ford. I would like to be as conservative as possible, just because we haven't seen that stimulus and that bailout that we anticipated, and I think that could have some unintended consequences coming down the pike here. So, anyways, thanks for that update.
Okay. Right. I just lost our agenda. Perhaps our most difficult agenda item.
Steve had a question.
Oh, shoot. I didn't see it. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I too just want to express my concern with the unknown at this time. I don't think anybody a year ago anticipated that we would still be dealing with COVID the way we are today, and that the economy would be suffering like it is. So I want to echo Commissioner Terosis's comments about being conservative at this time, until we can see what the future holds, if things open up, if the economy gets better, and so to the extent that we can continue to do the great job that we do with creating a budget and staying within its limits, I hope that we can continue to do that, especially with this added formula, right, of the unknown. Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Now we have the hardest agenda item, which is thanking our General Counsel, Stephen Lewis, for his years of selfless service to the board. He has provided us with thoughtful, prudent, incisive guidance, really putting him, I think, at the forefront of he's probably one of the most prominent legal experts on rent control in the country, and it is such a blessing that we have had him in our service for so many years. He is not only obviously an astute legal mind, but he believes in what he does. He gives his complete self to the board. He is unflappable, even when we are not. And he's just the consummate professional. You have enormous shoes to fill. And we are just grateful for everything you've done for us. It's truly been an honor to serve on the board. You're the only general counsel I've known in my time on the board. And we've had some fervent disagreements, and I really continue to feel like you teach me every day. I consider you a friend as well as an advisor to the board. I just have the utmost respect for you, especially being able to come through and be the level head when we really need that. So I'm so personally grateful for your service. And I know there are many others who want to share their gratitude as well. But truly from the bottom of my heart, you are such an exceptional public servant. And you deserve all the peace and relaxation and restoration that retirement brings. And we're really grateful for your service.
Well, thank you, Chair Phillips, very much. It really has been an honor to be able to serve the board and the people of Santa Monica, of course.
Commissioner Crosses.
Are we all saying something? Am I allowed to talk?
Of course.
So I don't know that I'm ever going to like anyone as much as Stephen. So I don't know, whoever our next general counsel is not going to be happy about it. Stephen, no, I'm kidding. Stephen is amazing, quite frankly. I don't think I've met a better public servant, and I hate to use the word servant, but I've never seen someone so neutral, so committed to the process and the job, and he quite frankly protects us all the time, especially me. He never puts his own ego. He doesn't have an ego, and that's pretty rare, I think, when you're talking about a general counsel. And I also think that he never injects his personal opinions into anything. Nothing is personal. It's always, we want the best, and this is what the law states. So, Stephen, first of all, thank you for your excellent professional work and guidance and keeping us out of trouble. On a personal note, I think that you have one of the highest levels of integrity of anyone I've ever seen. I learned from you. I think that, our entire state has learned from you. Our legislature is better off because you've been able to help guide some of the, legislation that we've put forward on housing issues. And I really am going to miss you so much. I implicitly trust everything that you tell me. And you've earned that in my eyes, because I can tell you, and I think everyone knows, I was very skeptical at the beginning. I think, Stephen is way, way, way smarter than I'll ever be. And I don't say that lightly, because I think that I always want to be, quite critical. And it's hard for me to think that, we have a very, very, intelligent general counsel, but Stephen just has blown me away, and you've earned all of my respect and admiration, and I hope that you'll continue to help us out in some capacity. I think you'll still be around, hopefully, in some capacities here in the affordable housing rent control world, and I'm just very much looking forward to seeing you in all of your future endeavors, because I know that this is not retirement. This is like the next chapter of your amazing successful life. So thank you. I wish we could celebrate in person. We are so indebted to you. I am, and I've learned so much from you.
Oh, thank you very much. And yes, it's true. I'm not going away. I'm not going into the sunset. I'll still be involved with our issues in some way.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a saying, right, oh, sorry, Commissioner Foster, would you like to?
Well, yeah, I didn't know if everybody's going to talk or not, but as the non-lawyer on the board, and there should always be at least one. Nicole and Carolyn stole all the good compliments. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Freezing up.
We got you. You okay?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's freezing. I think it's locking up. They stole all the good compliments, but I will say, Stephen, I don't know what we're going to do without you. You are there when I call you. You are there when I want to talk out the simplest of cases to the most complex legislation and litigation. And I love the way your staff reports tell a story that the most sharp legal minds can appreciate and fear, and yet every citizen can understand. And that is an art and a skill few possess to the level that you do. I consider you a friend, and I'm going to miss you terribly. You and Tracy both have ruined us for any other elected office, because I don't know that we would ever have such an effective general counsel ever again that leads such a stellar staff in this entire agency. Throughout the city, as we've seen through this campaign cycle, very few people, if anyone, can find fault with the rent board agency, and that is a tribute to you and Tracy and all the work that you do. But Stephen, we're gonna miss you.
Thank you. I would just say, if I can, that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Please go ahead, and then I'll recognize Commissioner John.
The board is an institution, and it existed as a strong institution before I got here, and it will continue as a strong institution after I am no longer here. And there will be a subsequent general counsel, and I believe that whoever the board picks, because I believe that the board will exercise sound judgment, that person will be able to carry on advising the board appropriately and earn the board's trust. Which isn't to say that I don't think I'm the bee's knees or anything, but it is it really has been an honor and a pleasure to serve as the board's general counsel over these last almost decade. As I think I've said to various of you collectively and individually, the thing that I'm most passionate about in my job is ensuring that government operates the way it's supposed to operate, that it performs the function for the public that it's intended to perform. And the expression of public policy is in the laws that we have, in our case, in the charter. We also have regulations that interpret that in a way that's understandable by everybody. And in some ways, my job in the majority of cases is not that difficult, because I don't have to make judgment calls about what the law is. I mean, the law is what it is. It may be difficult sometimes to implement it as written, emotionally difficult, but knowing what the law is, which is sometimes difficult, but usually it's not. And I've appreciated that the board has trusted the advice that I've been able to give it over the years as to what the law is, and also to listen to me, usually patiently, not always, but usually patiently, as to why I have concluded that the law requires one outcome or another. And I've also appreciated that when the board has not followed the advice that I've given, that it has done so thoughtfully, that it has said, yes, we understand what you're saying, and we have reached, in many cases, when I present an argument, I note that the conclusion that I have reached isn't the only possible one, and I think one may be better than the other, and the board may disagree, and that's the board's prerogative, because the board ultimately is the entity, not me, that's charged with making the decisions. And I've really appreciated that the board has given me the leeway to speak to it honestly and clearly and directly, and has never made me have any sort of level of discomfort doing that. And that's not always the case for public lawyers. Sometimes they are too harshly criticized by the entities that they advise to feel as though they can comfortably give their correct advice. I think in my case, because of my inheritance, my personality inheritance from my grandmother and my mother, that I would say what I had to say regardless. But but I appreciate that the board has never made me feel like that was something that I had to do into the wind. It's always been something that I know that the board has welcomed, and I'm very grateful for that.
Commissioner Drawn.
Well, I can't say anything more eloquently than those who have said before me, including Mr. Lewis, other than to say a true professional to the very end. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Most professional person I've ever met.
Yeah, right. I was thinking, at the end, there's when we learn about lawyers who work in public service, right? Often it's prosecutors who are referred to as ministers of justice, right? And you're supposed to be thinking about what does it mean to be a minister of justice, and you're supposed to have fidelity to the law. And truly, I don't think I really had seen that firsthand. Admittedly, I work in the private sector, but I don't think I really had understood what that meant until I had the opportunity to work with you, Stephen. It's really, it's unbelievably impressive. You handle pressure, and you're also not afraid to be a prophetic voice and rise to the occasion. I remember a couple of years ago, you were the reason why rent-controlled tenants in Santa Monica, over a horrible winter storm, and their building burned down, stayed housed. That was you. And that was you acting in a true public servant role. So I am just so grateful. And I know, we're belaboring the point, but I think it's well deserved, for everything that you've done for us, truly. I am a 100% supporter, and I really look forward to seeing what you do next. So thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Tracy wants to talk.
Tracy, oh, sorry. I didn't realize you wanted to speak, Tracy.
I'd like to speak, and I think Haka would like to as well.
Oh, shoot. Okay, yes.
So I'll leave the last word for you, Haka, but I have been so fortunate to have Stephen serving beside me for 10 of the 12 years which I've been the administrator. First, he was the public information manager, and then for the last 8 years as the general counsel. And he certainly has been a general counsel extraordinaire, as you all have said. I think he successfully led the defense of the board in virtually every litigation matter that came before us during his tenure, and he provided well-reasoned and sensible advice to limit the board's likelihood of facing litigation. He advised the staff throughout the agency on so many different issues and is widely respected both in our agency and throughout the city. He really has played a significant role in a number of the issues that cross the boundaries between the rent control agency and the other areas of the city. He's tirelessly worked with our lobbyists in Sacramento on state legislation that impacts us, including being a really significant player in the changes to the Ellis Act that you just implemented in our local regulations tonight. And he's expertly advised and counseled the board on all matters. He's undoubtedly one of the most foremost experts in rent control laws, as you've stated, and we've been very fortunate to have him on our team. For me personally, Stephen has been a fabulous collaborator and a rock to lean on. No words can adequately express the gratitude that I have for our 8-year partnership and the friendship that we developed. The Santa Monica Rent Control Agency is certainly better now with the contributions that you've made, Stephen. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm going to miss you very, very much. But I know you'll be around, and I'll have your ear if necessary. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. And Tracy, you've made working from day to day a real pleasure.
All right, Haka, you want to bring us home?
So, Commissioner, thank you very much for the opportunity to publicly thank and acknowledge Stephen. I first met and knew Stephen because he worked for the city of West Hollywood at the same time as my late husband. And even then, I knew of him as a man of integrity and expertise. And one of the reasons I took this position was because I would get to work with Stephen. And since then, Stephen has become I don't have another mentor in my life as Stephen is. He has mentored me in how to be a public attorney and also in my writing. But I wanted to share with you something beyond the expert person that you know as your general counsel. bit after the beginning of this current administration, when there was a lot of hysteria and concern and anxiety about repercussions against Iranians and Muslims, and it dominated the national conversation, and it was things with which I would come to work. Even just on his own, approached me and said, Haka, I just wanted to check in with you to see how you're doing with everything. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me, how safe it made me feel at home, at work, and how it made work feel like home. That takes someone whose humanity is matched by his professionalism. And I want you to also know that about Stephen as well. And I will greatly miss our partnership, and I wish him only the best in the next phase of his life.
Thank you, Haka. Thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure to me to have the staff that I've had to work with, the legal staff and also the entire agency staff. It's been, I can't tell you how many times somebody has come to me with a question and I've said, probably seemingly out of some sort of wisdom, but really just out of ignorance, well, what do you think?
All right. Wow. Well, I'm going to go take a little cry. Thank you so much, Stephen. I think that's really all we can say is we're so grateful for you. You're a blessing in our lives. So let's adjourn in your honor. And thank you, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
There are
Thank you to all of
motions
you.
to adjourn.
Nobody wants to.
No one wants to. Okay.
Move to adjourn in honor of Stephen Lewis and all of his contributions to not only the Santa Monica Rent Control Board, but really making sure that we have safer, more accessible, stable housing for all Californians. And any policy that we've put forward, it's because Stephen's been able to drive it. So you've made such an impact, and we adjourn in your honor.
Thank you.
Second.
Right. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
You
Good
too.
night.
Bye.
Vote. Vote. Vote.
Yeah.
Don't we have to roll call the adjournment?
Oh, we have to roll call the adjournment. I think Lonnie was trying to come in.
Sorry, Lonnie.
Okay, Commissioner Sultan.
Wait, so move and second by Foster. Are we calling roll?
Yes. It was moved by you, wasn't it, Carolyn?
Correct.
Okay. All right, we'll do the roll call. Commissioner Sultan?
Yes.
Commissioner Trosis?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Reluctantly, yes.
Commissioner Duran?
Yes.
And Chair Phyllis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Go vote.